What's up, guys? Welcome back for another One Piece chapter review. This week we're reviewing chapter 1154. We're getting pretty close to the 1200s now, and I really wonder how many chapters we have left in One Piece. That being said, this is an amazing chapter. We get some big reveals in this chapter, and we just learned so much. So let's just get right into it. Starting off the chapter, we of course have Yamato's cover story. To be honest, for the last 38 volumes, it's been a whole lot of nothing of super significance to the story, but it seems like we're getting somewhere now because Yamato's in Ringo with Okiku, and now they're at a shrine, and the shrine is for someone who was born in the West Blue but was raised in Ringo. We've never heard of anyone like that, so we actually have no idea who this is, and it seems like the shrine was tampered with in some way, so it's gonna go somewhere, but we just have no idea how the story's gonna develop from here. But that being said, let's see where it goes because so far, like I said, it's been a whole lot of nothing. So, getting into the actual chapter, we're seeing a lot of development for Elbaf, mostly how hard times have been hitting them ever since the birth of Loki. Now, we know none of this stuff is actually his fault, but thanks to his mother, all of the stuff is getting blamed on him. Now, some of these things we knew about when Loki first got mentioned during Big Mom's flashback in Whole Cake Island, but some of the stuff was mentioned when Loki first got properly introduced into the story, and we're basically seeing all of that unfold right now. So we actually start off the chapter in Big Mom's flashback where she killed Mount Fallbeard, as I believe is how you translate his name, and then you have Big Mom's attack where she destroyed half a giant village, and on top of that, after that event happened, you had a series of famine and drought and fires take place all over Elbaf, which stopped them from growing crops, and they had to go through Fimbulwinter basically the entire time that King Harald was away, so they didn't even have a proper ruler to guide them through the dark times. So this led to a lot of infighting between the giants, between neighboring villages, to the point where they were actually going to start attacking neighboring islands for their resources to take from the humans. It's honestly pretty crazy when you look at it how the situation of Elbaf is really tense before Harald really steps in, and how much of a great leader he is, and also how it reflects the current day of Elbaf, because they went from being raiders and pillagers to being scholars, and I'm really interested to see how the events of the story develop from here to where we get to the current point in the story where Harald gets assassinated. We don't get to see that in this chapter, but I'm really wondering how the story is going to turn out from here. It gets to the point where mass hysteria starts forming, where they start blaming Loki for everything, because his mother told them so, even without any proof of that. And then at that point, people even start trying to attack Harojin and his mother because they're like, oh, it's your brother who was at fault, so therefore you need to be the sacrifice in order to fix things on the island. Luckily, King Harald clutches being a great leader. I just want to say Harald at this point is an absolute great leader. He's learned from his mistakes and he's become a better person. And because he's become such a good person, he's been able to help his people out in so many ways, not just introducing like schools and libraries, but the connections that he was able to form actually allowed the giants at Elbaf to survive the harsh time by them bringing food from other islands enough to feed a whole island of giants. That's absolutely phenomenal. So it's at this point where Harald comes back to the island, he brings the food, and then he actually sees his son for the first time. He wasn't there for Loki's birth, and Estrid, Loki's mother, actually passed away right before Harald came. So at this point, he's grieving, and he tries to comfort his son and hold Loki, but at this point Loki's been so abused as a baby, he never once got embraced by his mother. And that from that point on, he became instantly jaded, and he given up on love, even only at a couple of months old, which is pretty tragic. We don't see stuff from that early on typically in One Piece, and because of that, it ends up making there's a lot of parallels in this chapter that we can make, especially with Loki and Kaido and how they were brought up in an early age, and how the chapter ends specifically. But we'll get there. So it's at this point where Harold tries to console his son and hug him, and he's like, Loki's just stoic as ever, and Harold's like, wow, not even a smile for your father, and it's like, I guess your mother did just die, so I guess that wouldn't be our smiling occasion. There's no reason to smile there. And then it's so crazy because at this point, Harold's just asking a bunch of questions, but then he doesn't put too much thought into it. He's like, why is his eyes covered? Oh, he has eye condition. He's like, oh, okay. And he's like, wait, why is he covered in bruises? Oh, well, toddlers. And he's like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And he just doesn't really pay attention to his son. And I get that he has a whole country to run, and this is nothing we new you've ever seen in any source of media. If you have very rich and successful parents, royalty, whatever, businessmen, doesn't matter, then they always have to like focus on the business to keep their family afloat, but at the cost of actually spending valuable time with their family that they actually need to form those bonds. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't type of situation. So I don't necessarily blame Harold because, like I said, his country just came off of a famine and they need answers, and he's been the one bearing that cross to actually help the countries around them so that they can build good relationships. And at the same time, he's trying to restore Elbaf and change it into a better nation overall. So at that point, it's like, yeah, he can spend more time with his son and probably get them more involved, just, hanging around. But at the same time, it's like, you can't have a baby on you and you have the harness, and then you're just like, yeah, we're gonna build bridges there, and I gotta go to this island here instead. You got the baby. I mean, granted, they are giants, so I feel like the rules could be stretched a little bit different. But like I said, I don't think Harold's a bad person for not giving too much attention to his son, because it's the needs of the many outweighs the needs of the few is how you say it. Unfortunately, when it becomes your own child, I don't know if that's the best way to go about it. So as Harold is taking charge of Elbaf again, now that he's back and he's restoring things, we get a little bit more knowledge about Elbaf. For example, the bar that we see when Shanks was there is Ida's bar. So the person that's working there now, I forget their name, they might be covering for Ida, which means most likely that Ida is possibly dead. I hope not for Harujin's sake, because that's like Harujin's mom is like the only person that legit loved him as a child. So hopefully she's just retired. Hopefully she doesn't die at the end of this. But she's a mom in One Piece, so she's most likely done for. But things are actually picking up, and we get to see Harold have a conversation. Now, we heard about this a little bit, believe either last chapter or the chapter before this, where Shanks was talking to Gabon about it, where Shanks met Harold at Reverie. But because things got so crazy there, they couldn't really have a moment to talk. And we see why is because, one, Harold was technically undercover, so he didn't go there of his own invite. He went there as a bodyguard for one of his ally kings, which is crazy that, because you gotta remember, Harold is a giant, but he's a really big giant because he has ancient giant blood. So this random king has a giant of all giants. It's probably even be hard to cover the horns up too, the horns sticking out. And then he's like, yeah, they were pretty much on to me there. It wasn't. I'm lucky that someone showed up, the assassination happened so that I could get out of there, because I probably wouldn't have been able to just walk out of there. And he's having a conversation with Mountain Beard at this point, and Mountain Beard's like, yeah, it is pretty fortunate because there is a bit of tension right now in between the world government and giants. Now, this is very interesting, the next lore that gets dropped on us. So, one, we hear about the assassination, and in two, we learned that Harold had questions. But the reason why the we learned that basically Harold is trying to form connections and even probably meet with the world government to have better understandings of the world, right? But the world government is blocking him off from that because of the past relationship with the giants. And we learned that back in the day, there was a company called the Gari, either the Gali Ra or the Gari Ra. And the Gali Ra, well, I'm just gonna call them the Gali Ra, right? The Gali Ra was formed of like 100 ancient giants who are shipwrights, and we know that they went around the world building stuff and learning stuff. And it's similar to how the Gali La Company is now in Water 7. Now, it's very interesting because back in Water 7, we learned that Iceberg was the one who unified the shipwrights and turned it into the Gali La. So the Gali La wasn't just always there at Water 7 as a staple, right? Now, the reason why this is interesting is because Tom was the one who had the blueprints for Pluton. And he passed those down to Iceberg, who then gave them to Frankie, right? This wasn't like a Galila tradition. This was just like the shipwrights of Water 7 were the ones who built Pluton. So it's very interesting that this is not a coincidence, because like specifically like because it was Iceberg who unified all the shipwright docks in Water 7 to form the Galilog company. And then we found out that there was a previous iteration of this called the Gali Ra. And it's pronounced, it's spelled differently, different kanji for Gali Ra versus Gali La. So it's not like an L versus R thing in Japanese, right? So it's really interesting how Otis connecting the pieces from Water 7, which is even more interesting when we connect. I'm going to connect something from post Enies Lobby to what's happening right now in the story, and it's absolutely crazy how this is going on. So basically, these giants, they just disappeared off the face of the earth. They sent a letter to Mountbeard saying they got captured, but it doesn't make sense how they just got captured and no one even saw or heard anything, because these are giants. How do they just disappear? So it seems like there's like a hidden plot that's going on, which we know Emu has something going on underground, so we have to see more about that to know how this is gonna lead. But I do think that the Garira were the people who built Pluton, so I imagine that Pluton is gonna be a massive ship when it gets revealed, because it is under Wano right now, of course. So at this point, we start seeing the full dynamic between Loki and Harojin. I did think at one point that they were raised as brothers, but it doesn't seem like that was the case. I know earlier we did see at one point Harold was hugging Loki and Harojin at the same time, so I thought, especially when Harold was back, that he would embrace his children a lot more, but it really seems like they don't even recognize Harojin as like a son of Harold. They just see him as the child of like a concubine, succubus, whatever you want to call it. And so they don't even acknowledge his royal blood at this point. Some people do, some guards do, but for the most part, Loki doesn't acknowledge it, and a lot of people just don't acknowledge this. So when Loki's running around, Harojin's the only one to step up to him, but Loki's like, you don't even get to, like, Harojin, he's going crazy. He's like, how dare you destroy this town that Dad went through hell for to build? And then Loki's like, how dare you call my father Dad? You know, you're just a bastard. I'm the prince, so I can do whatever I want. And it's at this point Loki starts raising hell, and it's clearly a desperate plea for help. He just wants attention. He's kind of like Naruto in that sense, right? And it's really interesting because at that point, everyone starts coming together. You know, Gerd is going to Harajin and helping him out, bandaging him up, and Loki's by himself. Yeah, he has his animals, but he made those animal friends because he had no one else that wanted to be around him. Because remember, even though he's the prince, the allegations about him destroying the island and putting in famine never went away. And on top of that, one of the important things I guess I forgot to mention is that Loki's caretaker was Estrid's brother, and Estrid's brother blamed Loki for her death. So you know he probably had a hand in spreading those rumors and making Loki's reputation even worse than it already was. And at that point, there's a lot of things that happen. First off, it looks like the horse that was gifted is supposed to be a good luck horse, just randomly died. We don't know if Loki killed it. It might have died of natural causes. it could even be Estrid's brother killed it and then blamed it on Loki just to ruin his reputation even more. However, I do think that out of every, not accusation, because that's not the right word I want to use for this, but I do think that out of everything Loki was blamed for, I will blame him for one thing. I do think that he killed Estrid's brother. Because he has violent tendencies because he's given up on love, and when Estrid's brother dies, it's kind of a small panel like, oh no, Estrid's brother, this guy passed away, and look, he had like a slight smile on his face. I think it said, let me check real quick. Yeah, I just checked. So it doesn't even say that he just passed away. It said that they found his body in the realm of the dead. So it's not even like he just went up and died. He was dragged to the realm of the dead, and maybe the animals killed him, or maybe Loki pushed him off the edge. We don't know, but I think, like, I know we're not supposed to blame Loki for a lot of things, but I do think that was something he did, and honestly, it's pretty much warranted at that point. But yeah, getting back into what I was referring to before is Loki wreaked havoc on the town, and then Harjan has his friends to console him, and then he's going on a bigger rampage after seeing that. And then at that point, he sees a mother holding their child, and at that point, he becomes like the soy jack who starts crying while the Chad gets embraced by his girlfriend, basically. And so he's so emo at this point because he's 15, literally 15, I think, and he just throws himself off the edge of Elbath again because he's a hormonal teenager at this point. And at that point, we get the really big reveal. This is crazy. So Loki falls off the edge, throws himself off the edge. His bandages come off. We see him crying because he just wants to be accepted and loved, but he never got that. And then at that point, we see mountains starting to get destroyed. And then who comes out of the woods, out of the mountains? We see Whitebeard. We see Shiki. We see Buckingham Stussy. And who's in front of all of them? Rox D. Zebek. We finally get a reveal for Rox D. Zebek, and we now know what he looks like, and he looks exactly like Blackbeard. This is something that fans have been theorizing about since day one, ever since we learned his full name, Rox D. Zebek, specifically because Blackbeard's main flagship is named the Saber of Zebek. So the connection was always there if you even know a little bit of lore about One Piece. But then we also learn in the title card that he's Blackbeard's father. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of this reveal. I don't think it should have been super dramatic, but it's also kind of weird storytelling. It's like, Rock Steve Zebek. Oh, by the way, he's Blackbeard's father too. Even if you would have just showed Zebek's face, we would have seen it. He looks like Blackbeard, the same nose and the same eyes. Now that's important because there was a theory on a YouTube channel once where I saw that someone theorized that Buggy was actually going to be the son of Rox, but it got revealed that Blackbeard is. I don't think that anything changes now. I did want Buggy to be like his son, but if you look at Zebek's eyes, it's hard to tell because Buggy's wearing makeup all the time, but they actually have the same eyes. And on top of that, Buggy has the big red nose. Now, there could be two explanations for this, but there's weird things in One Piece, but typically we don't see things like a big red nose. We'll see Usopp's round long nose, we see Kaku's square long nose, but it's not too common for things like that to happen. So you can either say this is a birth defect for a joke with Buggy, or you could say that he's been disguising his true appearance this entire time. Because what if the red nose is just like a cosmetic that he's glued onto his face? It's possible. And the reason why I say it is because if you look at Buggy's eyes, he has the same eyes as Zebek. They have the three things, I think Perona has this too, but there's three eyelashes there. But obviously, Perona might not. Timelines might match. Perona's in her 20s or something like that. But Buggy is the same age as Shanks. So, and Rocks died 38 years ago. Both Shanks and Buggy are 40. And Buggy was established to be born in the Grand Line, unlike Shanks who was born in the West Blue. So I think that, crazy thought, Buggy and Blackbeard might be brothers. You just never know. Maybe they're twin brothers. Nah, that's crazy. I mean, I think Blackbeard is the same age as Shanks though, so they might be twin brothers. That holy shit. Buggy and Blackbeard might be biologically twin brothers. We just don't know at that point. I mean, they could also be uh, brothers from another mother, I guess, at that point too. We just never know. But yeah, that's the chapter. Absolutely crazy reveal. I did a lot of yapping, but thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate this. I heard something about a break being next week, but I'm hoping not. I really want to follow up on this, and I'm going to be dropping more videos throughout the week. So thank you guys for watching. Late Developers signing out.
Everyone,